On the 16th of April, 2013, upon starting a game of Mob of the Dead, players were intrigued to see something they hadn't seen before. A cipher, more specifically, an ADFGX cipher, hidden in plain sight. This cipher would become infamous in the zombies community, and many people would try their hand at trying to solve it. In fact, it was so difficult to solve that it wasn't solved until 5 years later, in 2018. Now, the method of solving it isn't really important, but what is important is what the message actually was. Solving the cipher gave you this message, or more importantly, this message. Urgent, the giant is in France. Interesting, right? Well, not really. See, as far as I and the community are concerned, this is clearly a reference to Origins. Now, what's the problem with this? Well, it took 5 years to solve, but it was referencing something that only came out about 3 months later, so by the time it was actually solved, the information we were given was practically useless. Furthermore, if you'd just watched this random guy's video, he just told us the answer anyway.
De Reese is in France, or more specifically, the giant is in France.
Now, I can hear a few of you saying, yeah, but the process was really cool, and ultimately, it's about the journey, not the end result. And I'm going to contest that. When it comes to ciphers, I think players can fit into 3 or 4 different categories. The first category is obviously the people that don't even care what it has to say, and this probably takes up a large amount of the player base to begin with, probably over 70%, maybe even more. So already, only 30% of the people playing the game are actually going to care what the cipher even has to say to begin with. The next set of people are obviously the people that are actually going to solve it. This is literally around 10, maybe even 5 people who will dedicate a lot of the time into solving the cipher. Now, if you don't fit into one of these 2 groups, which you probably don't, then I guarantee that this scenario will be extremely relatable. You're playing a map, like the Giant for instance, and you're walking around and all of a sudden you see a cipher. You think, oh, that's pretty cool, and then you run off and never think about it again, until 4 years later when you see that one of your favourite zombies YouTubers has made a video called Solving the Impossible Giant Easter Egg. Now I want to look at this specific cipher because this is the reason that I've made this video to begin with, and I really think it highlights the point I'm trying to make. Now, this cipher was made in 2015 but wasn't solved until 2018. The way it was encrypted was so hard that it was the same encryption method that the Germans used during the Second World War. So you think that a cipher using an insanely hard level of cryptology and that took 3 years to solve would yield some interesting results. The cipher reads as follows: a city of fire surrounds the warrior, the last of his kind. Yeah, this cipher that was using the Enigma code to encipher it tells us about the map Gorokrovi, which came out about 5 months later. So not only was the cipher just obviously not worth solving, so it already had all the information that was given to us in the cipher by the time we solved it, essentially making it a waste of time for literally everybody involved. It benefited no one other than the one person who solved it, who gets a little bit of satisfaction that they solved an unsolved cipher. The cipher was not worth the amount of effort that the community and this one specific guy that solved it put into it. Furthermore, ciphers don't even make sense in the context of the story that Jason Blundell is telling. It's not like, for instance, in my favourite show, Gravity Falls, gives the characters more characterisation and is also used by characters who would be writing ciphers in the first place. However, in Zombies, why would characters like Dr. Monty be writing a cipher to put onto a map like Zetsubo no Shima? It doesn't make sense, it's contrived, and there's no logical explanation for it being there. In fact, it makes more sense for it to be in the early Jimmy Zielinski maps, because they had more similarities to things like espionage and covert operations, like on 5. It makes more sense for a cipher to be on 5 than it does for Zetsubo no Shima. What's even more strange is that they had a concrete way of delivering exposition in a way that was far more accessible in the radios. The radios are far superior to the ciphers, and yet for some reason the ciphers are the things that Blundell went with in Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 4. But let me ask you this, what is worse than putting in an almost impossible Cipher into a zombies map? An actually impossible Cipher on a zombies map. The impossible Easter egg on Shadows of Evil is really an impossible Cipher, and it simultaneously intrigues me and infuriates me. A big part of this is the rhetoric that Jason Blundell uses. By calling the Cipher impossible, if he means it literally, then it is probably the biggest waste of time in the world. What is the point of adding a Cipher that nobody can solve? Furthermore, if we go back to what I said earlier about the information being outdated, then there's probably no point in even solving this Cipher to begin with, because it probably won't tell us anything new. Even though the idea is kind of cool, the implementation is terrible, and that seems to be a running theme with Jason Blundell. But I want to know what you think about Ciphers. Do you agree with me and think they're a bit of a waste of time? Or do you think they add an extra level of detail into the zombies maps that can't be done by any other means? Let me know. And until then, thanks for watching.